That's actually, I just took that picture just last weekend. It's next to my parents' house. They live out in Bearspaw, so I just, otherwise you're seeing my office, which is not the nicest place. So it looks a little nicer with the background.
We should have a beach version.
Yeah. And funny you should say that. We do have a beach version. There you go. So I'll get out of the way. That's actually like 3 kilometers away from my wife's house in the Philippines. I kid you not. So that's like a real deal live beach. It's I've enjoyed it many times. But I'll take it off now. There we go.
Feeling a little out of place. I need a background.
You do.
Yeah. You got a door behind you, so there you go.
Right.
You need to run out quickly.
I have a wiener dog. That's what I have.
And we've got a dog. Awesome.
You're gonna love doing these things from home. I mean, it's just, this is real. This is my life. My dog does not leave my side.
Yeah, because I was going to do a puppet show.
Oh, that's so great.
That's great.
I would pay to see that. That, we'll save that for the registration that costs.
There's people that would pay not to see that, okay?
That's true.
So people could pay today.
Absolutely. Well, let's call it a donation, right?
That's right. We're going to donate today to Fresh Start Recovery for Stacey not to do a puppet show. So he will fully deliver today. Fully.
Love it. That's a good cause. Fresh Start.
I think so. I think it is.
Okay. I think I found Julie. Hang on. And I think we're almost ready to get going.
This kicks off right at noon?
Right at noon.
Okay.
We need to get done so you can get down to Tim Hortons and grab some coffee.
There's that.
So we're live on Facebook, and so if any of you who are watching or any of you who are social media savvy would like to share, that would be greatly appreciated so we can get the good word out. And so it's going live on the Wellness Innovate Facebook page. And if you're wondering, like, what's the handle? It's Wellness Innovate. So, there's only one of us, and that's pretty cool. So please just share it off of there if you're into that, or if you happen to be Facebook friends with myself or Connie, I'm sure it'll show up on our feed as well. And we just want to get the good word out. Connie and I worked hard to pull together some great panelists. Some of them we had to bribe and pay and do weird things. So, these folks have a lot of wisdom, right? Especially Stacey.
Hey, who got paid?
Who's getting paid? What? No.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I tell people we're not technically a nonprofit, but we are a nonprofit. I did spend a lot of time in the nonprofit industry, as you know, and but Wellness Innovate is still a nonprofit, though I guess according to law, it's not. So there we are.
I'm not even going to watch today.
That is a good use. That's a new use of masks I haven't seen. So that's good.
Okay, you gotta give us the word when we're going live, eh?
Yeah, like right now.
We are live.
We're live.
Stacey, that was so live. That was on for the world to see.
Oh, good.
That was almost a puppet show.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It had strings.
Absolutely.
In the office for other props.
So Julie, you're on okay? You want to test your microphone and video just for a moment? Anyways. There she is. Okay.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm on.
Okay. No testing required. You're a Zoom veteran by now, eh?
Yeah, I've been living my life on Zoom, just zooming my life away.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. Well, we're going to be getting started in a moment. And, if there's one thing that we've learned doing these webinars and also these conferences is that 15 minutes, I don't know if anyone does events, but just something that we found was that 15 minutes of speaking has it really seems like a sweet spot. And so it's a challenge because, you know, we have people here today who could literally probably take the entire 2 hours and we would still be learning. And so we want to acknowledge the fact that this is a bit of a challenge, but we're going to do it. Every single speaker is going to give you lots of hope. Someone had asked for that specifically, strategies and tools, ways to pivot, and they're going to do it in 15 minutes. And that makes them amazing.
100% amazing, 110%. So why don't you open us up, Connie? You know, I guess today, you know, tell us a little bit about Pivot, and then we'll dive right into our first speaker.
Well, we've been watching and listening, leaning into what people are saying in business. And one of the greatest things that we saw was just this need to be adaptable right now. And so that's where this word pivot has come from. How do we pivot? How do we move forward right now in this place in COVID, especially as we're beginning to reopen? And so we're so excited that you're here today. And again, any moment you want to type something in the chat, please feel free. This is an interactive experience. And so we're ready to get going there, Abe.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And again, thanks everybody for joining us. We're live across Facebook right now, and we're recording the webinar today, the conference, in case you are missing it or want to come back and hear one of the great speakers. We, like Connie mentioned, our company, Wellness Innovate, focuses on workplace mental health. And of course, a huge part of that has been noticing that Pivot has had both a physical health impact, but obviously a mental health impact as well. And so kind of without further ado, our very first speaker today is Minister Jason Luan. If I was picking a cabinet minister for mental health and addiction, and I'm not, but if I was, it would be Minister Luan. When you look at his background and his not only does he have a master's degree in social work, but he has spent 3 decades working in the front lines of social issues, and I would say has a very unique understanding. And I have noticed since he's taken the reins, just as a practitioner in community, the difference in the energy, in the approach, and in the focus. And so, Minister Luan, we're very honored to have you today, and please go ahead and take us away. I'm going to stop the screen sharing so that we can focus on your image there.
Thank you, Abe. Can you guys all hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your kindly introduction. I am so thrilled to have a chance today to join all of you to share some thoughts on how we adapt to our new reality. And I commend you for organizing today's conversation virtual conference. Your subject you choose couldn't be better in terms of timing as we move into the next stage of COVID-19 response by gradually reopen the business. Let me tell you this, when we speak of the unprecedented challenge Albertans face, not only from the pandemic, but the crash of oil price, the unprecedented concern for our economic outlook, plus the flood that's coming on, damaged a good part of our northern Alberta. So let me tell you, as the Crown Minister for Mental Health, my heart and soul are with Albertans who are going through such a tough time. But let me flip that to the other side, not to understating how difficult this has been for all of us, including when we have to take very strong health measures to reinforce social distancing. It comes with price we pay. I think I probably can fairly safe to say that COVID-19, this social distancing affected all of us. Doesn't matter what corner, what age, what group. So the underlying issues that impacting us, the anxiety, the uncertainty, many of the changes that impact our life is real. And I see that reflected in our interactions among ourselves, to our families, to our colleagues, and so on and forth. So if we don't address those issues heads on, it will take its own form and shape in all kinds of ways of expressing behavior. And to a large degree, I feel like the summer of social unrest that we see today has partially connected to this, because the issue, the underlying issue is people are unsettling. There are lots of things, fear, lack of security, lack of hope, lack of a sense of where we're heading to. It's all accumulating. So if you don't have managed properly that kind of energy, it could turn into a very negative force that is detrimental to all of us. I want to commend to the organizers for today's conference that you are leading the pack in terms of pick up the topic, business resiliency, just as we are opening up business economy, because among all the factors contributing to our mental wellness, let me tell you that economic component is one of the biggest one. Despite that, COVID-19 health safety concern has predominated at the early stage, but I really started seeing it when you're dealing with the so-called typical crisis curve. It goes through three stages, how people respond. We're now into the second stage that we are adjusting to new reality. We have to figure out what's the new norm and how we move on with this life. So given that your subject you choose to talk today is so timely, and I want to thank you so much for opening this up. The other part I want to share with you is many of you have noticed that since we formed our new government, mental health and addiction recovery has been one of the top priorities for this new government. And I'm very fortunate to be the first social minister fully sort of designate our whole ministry for this mandate of mental wellness. And you hear Premier talk about our government want to have a new focus, which is recovery-oriented system care. And I want to connect that concept to the concept of today's conference, because to me, and those who are in social work field, which I come from, when we talk about resiliency, when we talk about recovery, it is a strengths-based approach for solving social issues. I was kidding to a lot of my friends. I said, 30 years ago, I graduated from U of C with a master's degree of social work. I felt so proud. I'm well educated, and now I'm going out of the world to change the world. But little did I know, lots of stuff we learned at that time gradually changed. Halfway through my career, I learned we were trained to find the problem, or so-called problem identification, and then find the strategies to work with that, and then fix the problem. So that's the so-called managing problem approach. But halfway through my career, I was so thrilled with the industry's kind of a new movement that comes with a so-called resiliency-based, strengths-based new approach. And let me tell you this, to today, I still felt the current one is a lot more effective and efficient way of changing human behaviors, including mental health, mental wellness. So I am completely sold and very enthusiastic that our new government, our premier, really support this cause. So when we talk about recovery-oriented continuum care, it is a reflection of, instead of worrying or managing the problem of mental illness and problem of addiction, we're flipping that into how can we find opportunities to build the strengths, the assets that community and individuals have as a way of increasing the protective factors, increasing their capacity so that they can move on to a new life that is healthy, constructive, and engaged as positive citizens. So they feel proud of the journey they're taking, which is a drastic sort of a shift from how we find ways of managing the addiction, managing the mental illness, spending millions of dollars trying to fix the problem, end up having to face with the ever increasing population of people who get stuck in that circle. So I am very enthusiastic about that, and I want to link that to today's conversation about resiliency and strengths-based kind of a model. Lastly, I would like also to share a piece of our new development. Given with COVID-19 sort of a crisis, and our government rolled out one of the most comprehensive mental health and addiction action plan regarding to COVID-19, which was $53 million being designated on top of $140 million that Premier already announced at the beginning of our mandate. So with that additional 53, we designed such a comprehensive package that corresponding to the crisis curves, from the impact level to response to recovery, with such a sort of a width and depth that not only will have a whole basket, I call the front end, e-therapy, virtual mental health support, information, hotline, all those 21 million designated for that. But we also have another pocket we call basket number 2 is the community grant. That meant when we're into this recovery stage, we need to mobilize our community, people helping people to get through this. So when we are having the sense of we can do something, we can make a difference, the fear, anxiety, and uncertainty, all of that will correspondingly decrease, and that can significantly help our general population. And I want to pitch that to this conversation conference today. You folks take advantage of the opportunity. When we are reopening business for small business, large, medium ones, every employer is need to think of how can we adjust our current practice so that we can keep our employees safe, but also be on the best of their mental condition. When I'm a big believer with your mission here. When you have employees who are strong, healthy in mind, strong body, they're the best contributors to the company. They're the best to get results. They're the best to bring profit and everything else for you. It's a great investment for employers to pay attention about this, which I'm a total converted sort of believer for that. So your cause and the work you do connect very well to the ministry, to the government direction that we're leading on. So I want to give you a final thoughts. Yes, we're in a tough time, but our burden spirit rise again in the midst of that. Not only from the carrying point, but also from the resiliency piece. I think entrepreneurs, job creators, there is a forefront carrier and the deliver agent for that Alberta spirit. So I want to encourage all of you folks continue champion on this cause and do everything you can to change our work environment, and through that change our community, change our province, change our new world. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much, Jason. We just want to take a moment and thank you, show our gratitude towards you for being here today. It means a lot. There were comments in the chat just saying how pleased people are that our government showed up today. It speaks to business owners. It reminds them that you see them. And we just want to honor you for all the work you've done, for taking this challenge, this challenging time, and leading so courageously. We just honor you, and we thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome, yes.
All the best. My apology, I have another thing I need to attend to. I can't stay through the conference, but I wish all of you success for this dialogue and lead some innovative practice. I'm looking forward to hearing back from you guys. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Minister.
Well, our next speaker is no stranger to, Calgary, but also Alberta. He has led us through fire and flood and brimstone. And, honestly, when I think of Mayor Nenshi, I think of someone who I'm so thankful that he thinks outside the box. He moves forward. We are just so honored that he is here today. And we just want to set you loose, Mayor Nenshi, to go and be whatever you need to be. My favorite part of you is that you just say what everyone's thinking, and you just move forward and you're just you. And we welcome you to be you today and go rogue and do whatever you need to do to shake us up, lead us on. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Connie, and thanks, Connie and Abe, for putting this all together. My colleague Nancy Close, who many of you know, is on the call right now, and I cannot see her, but I can just imagine the look on her face. Don't touch your face, Nancy. Face palming is not allowed under a COVID crisis. When you heard Connie say, okay, Mayor, just go rogue, because poor Nancy's entire job is to prevent me from going rogue. But I will try to be reasonably well behaved if I can, Nancy. And for all of you, thanks so much for joining us here. I didn't think you wanted to see the inside of my bedroom, so I put up a picture behind me of Elbow River Camp during the Calgary Stampede, on the shores of the Elbow River, right near the place where the Elbow and Bow Rivers meet, the place that the Blackfoot call Mokinstis. And I put up this picture very specifically today because it makes me think about the long thread of history that ties together community here in Calgary. So as you all know, directly behind me is that spot that the Blackfoot call Mokinstis, the Elbow, the place where two rivers come together. And for thousands and thousands of years, people have been gathering at that spot. And we forget sometimes when we're complaining about the rain and the snow that this is actually a pretty arid region. It doesn't rain that much. It's not very wet here. And the reason that people have been gathering in this place is because of the life-giving elements of the water. So for thousands of years, people have been coming to this spot to hunt and fish and trade, to live, to love, to dream, to dance, to fight sometimes, but ultimately to engage in that very human act of building community. And from the original inhabitants of this land, the Niitsitapi just means people. We call them the people of the Blackfoot Confederacy now, then Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani people. Further upriver, we have the Mountain people, the Stoney Nakoda people, the Chiniki, the Wesley, and the Bearspaw nations. Right on the borders of Calgary, we have the Beaver people, whom we call the Tsuut'ina people. Of course, we honor the Métis people with their long history on this land. We also remind ourselves that for the last 150 years or so, we haven't always succeeded, but we have tried. We have tried to be a beacon and of light and hope for so many in a cold and dark world. And we have said to people from every corner of this broken earth, come here. You're welcome here. You'll be safe here. Your kids and their kids and their kids will have tremendous opportunity here. And I wanted to raise that as we start our conversation today, because I want to remind us in these difficult times, in times of a global pandemic, something like the likes of which we've never seen before, in times where we are forced to confront those times when we haven't met that promise of our community, when we're forced to confront those times when we understand that that promise is not a reality for Black Canadians, for Indigenous Canadians, for many people, racialized people and other minorities in our community. that despite all the progress, despite all the success, we still live in a world where we don't always offer people that life of safety and of dignity and of opportunity as we share this land. And so I've been thinking a lot over the last little while about these dual pandemics that we're facing. The COVID issue, of course, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that in a minute, but also the fact that, you know, what brought mass gatherings back, even though it makes me very nervous from a public health perspective, what brought mass gatherings back were people willing to stand up for their own rights and the rights of others. And where that places us in the long thread of history on this land at what I think is a critical and pivotal moment. And I think it's important for all of us to think about our own role in how we move forward in that pivotal and critical moment. Before I go on, I want to say thank you to Minister Luan for his words. I know he's gone, but through you, I want to thank him for his words. And, you know, I want to thank the provincial government for their real focus and emphasis on mental health and addiction, which is welcome and is critical to all of us. So I think that we are in a place where we got a lot of good ingredients, and we have to determine what kind of recipe we're going to make out of those ingredients. So let's get back to COVID then, shall we? When Connie earlier said any of our speakers could just go on for 2 hours, I think she actually meant me. But I do have 15 minutes, so I want to make sure we cover a number of things. But let's go back to COVID. So you've heard me talk a lot about this particular crisis and how we are thinking about it in terms of the community as a whole. I should say that in the long history of Calgary, over 135 years since Calgary became a town, we have declared a state of emergency exactly twice. And lucky me, I got to be the mayor who signed both of them. But this is very different than the flood. The flood was a natural disaster. It was a natural disaster that affected physically one part of the community. And let's not forget, the rain started on Thursday, and by Saturday it was sunny. And we had a long job to deal with recovery. The response to this pandemic has already been months long, and it will be months left to go. And from the very beginning, we have been looking at three lenses of how we think about our response and recovery. This is a physical health crisis, obviously. It's a mental health crisis, and it's also an economic crisis. And as we think about those gauges, I keep phasing out as I move my hands. I'll try to use my hands less, but it's hard for me. As we think about these phases, we really have to think about how we manage each of those gauges. Obviously, people's lives and the public health issue are the most important thing we're dealing with now. But we also have to think about every action we take and every impact we have in terms of what it does for mental health in the community and what it does for the economy as well. And that's really been my messaging through all of this. You know, I started with two simple phrases. The first one was clean hands, clear heads, open hearts. The second was stay safe, be kind to everyone, and together we'll save lives. And those two things are as true today as they were on the 12th of March. When we talk about the first one, clean hands, clear heads, open hearts, it really talks about one, clean hands. That doesn't just mean wash your hands and do it for 20 seconds at a time, sing happy birthday twice. It means much more than that. It means think about your own health as the community's health. Think about your role as not being someone who doesn't want to get sick, but think of yourself as someone who's already sick and doesn't want to spread the virus. Think about how every single person you come into contact with could be your 90-year-old grandmother. Do every single thing you can to prevent the spread of the virus. And right now, as we slowly ease restrictions in the community, that means this kind of hand hygiene, covering your cough, wearing a mask, covering your nose and mouth every time you're out of your house are really important things and really important messages that we've got to continue to push to people as we try to prevent a further pandemic or a second wave. And that's really the critical thing here. No single one of us can control the flow of the water in a flood. Every single one of us has the power in our own hands, our own clean hands, to be able to control the flow of the pandemic. And it's important for us to remember that. Clear heads. At a time like this, it's easy to be angry and frustrated and sad. A lot of us are grieving a lot of things about the life that we are missing. You know, I myself, when I announced that there'd be no Stampede this year, it was the right thing to do. We announced it on the same day that we said there'd be no folk festival this year. And when I got home that night, I looked at this picture behind me, and I actually gave myself the permission to be a little sad about missing things that I personally love, about pieces of my own summer that I was looking forward to. But ultimately, we don't have the ability to give in to that sadness and that anger. Every single decision we make has to be clear-headed and thoughtful. Every single action we take has to be based on what the impact of that will be on our community. And finally, open hearts. That's the most important, and that's what I want to focus on today. For a lot of our neighbors, this pandemic has been terrifying. It's been isolating. We have to remember that physical distancing doesn't mean social isolation, that we need to reach out to one another and look after one another even more in scary and uncertain times like what we've got now. But it's also highlighted the important work that we're doing in the city on mental health and addictions. So, you know, I know many of you on the webinar, and you know that I've said for a long time that the focus of my third term as mayor for me personally is on developing a community action plan on mental health and addiction, the best in the world. That's the goal. And our group, the Community Action on Mental Health and Addiction Stewardship Group, has been such an important part of this. They've been so important in advancing our goals on creating hope and creating support for individuals and families, for trying to build positive mental health. Because while it's easy for me to say, you got to get over the anger, the fear, the frustration, the sadness, and the grief, they're very real. People really have them. And so we have to provide people with tools and supports that go way beyond buck up and just put that aside and focus on dealing with the emergency, because we can't do that for this long. You know, 1 in 5 of us over the course of our lifetimes will experience mental illness. It means every single one of us will either experience it ourselves or have it in our closest family members and our closest circle of friends. Never talk about it. And so it's really important for us to think hard about how we can push forward to ensure that we're supporting people who are in that situation. So while 1 out of 5 of us will face mental illness in our lifetimes, 5 out of 5 of us need to address our own mental health and the mental health in our community. Means every workplace needs to have a mental health strategy. It's not just something that lives in the HR department or in the employee assistance department. It needs to be a community approach throughout our organizations to think about how we work together. We have to create these outcomes that the Community Action on Mental Health and Addiction group has come up with. A caring community, a community where people are safe and well, a community where people are safe and well in their workplaces, where everyone easily has the ability to find help and access the help they need. So you're going to hear from a lot of people today on specific tips and techniques and tools that they've done in their workplaces. But what I want you to really think about is, how do we use this moment of crisis? How do we use this moment of crisis in our own lives and in our own community to really become stronger, to build back better? So how do we, as employers, as family members, as friends, as community workers, develop the attitude and practices that we need? How do we as neighbors help our neighbors? How do we care for our seniors? Because if there's one thing we've learned about from this pandemic is the absolute disgrace that we have in our long-term care system and how we have to do so much better. The pandemic, of course, is happening at the same time as revitalized discussions on racism and on the plight of racialized people in our communities. So all of these things really matter. And I want to think about this time, this pivotal point in our history, as a point that people will look back to and say, you know what, we built back better. We built back stronger. And I think that is really critical. So I know that I was warned that I would get muted at exactly 15 minutes, and I am at 13:30 according to my own clock. So I will finish off by really saying that you've heard me say this for many years. The power to make change in our community doesn't come from good-looking politicians making speeches. I don't know any of those. The power in our community comes from every single one of us taking action. The first lines of Calgary's anti-poverty action plan are, "My neighbor's strength is my strength." And that is never more true than now. And it really is important for every single one of us to ensure that we're taking those actions as leaders in the community, but also as friends. So, you know, for 9 years, Nancy and I have been talking about three things for Canada, 3 acts of service that every single one of us should do at a minimum every single year. And I know everyone on this webinar goes, 3 acts, you mean in January? We do 3 times 3 times 3 to the power of 3 every year. But it's time to start talking about that again. It's time to start talking about 3 acts of kindness, how we can all look after one another. Because ultimately, clean hands, clear heads, open hearts. But also, when we stay safe, when we make kindness our central platform, when we are kind to everyone in understanding of their fear, of their grief, of their anger, that's how we save lives. And together, as a community, we've saved thousands of lives through this pandemic. And so our chance now is to continue to save lives through the rest of this pandemic and through our entire future together. So with that, thank you all so much. I will stick around for a little bit. Like Minister Luan, I do have to drop off at some point, but I'm really happy to be here. I'll look at some of your comments in the chat, and I look forward to hearing from the other speakers. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor Nenshi. We're just so grateful for the many years that you have led us, and you've led consistently. What I heard however many years ago that the poverty initiative started, you've said the same thing and you stayed the same. And that's builds so much trust in us as a city. And thank you. We just honor you as well for the leadership you've given and for the unexpected mayorship you've had. You have led well. We value and honor you, Mayor Nenshi. Thank you. Well, we're going to move on to our next speaker, Dr.Jan Jaffer. What a phenomenal leader, business owner. He owns a dental office. He owns 20 clinics, including 5 specialty clinics. And I won't steal his thunder. I won't tell you too much because he's probably going to tell you, but he has pivoted many, many times. And like we have said, from the very beginning of the conference, this isn't about being experts on a global pandemic. This is looking back at how have we overcome in the past? How have we pivoted in the past? How can we learn and move forward? And Dr. Jan is one of those people. He's also extremely generous, takes a team to Guatemala every year. So he's generous and he gives back, and he's giving back today. And we just welcome you here, Dr. Jan. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I was just trying to share my screen and I cannot. So I'm not sure if it's possible to unlock that so I can share my screen. But
yeah, try again now, Dr. Jan. Go ahead.
Appreciate it. Still not allowing me to share my screen.
Okay, let me see if I can fix that. But
yeah.
You go ahead.
No problem. I'll start chatting. So, I mean, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, I really appreciate this. And it's always difficult following the mayor speaking because he does such a great job of bringing everything together and talking about it. And obviously, he's done so many great things in the city. I really appreciate all the work that he's done and been a part of so many of the things that we've been involved in. And so, you know, difficult to follow him, but thankful for him to be there. All right. So I think I've got my screen going now. Let's see if this works. Perfect. Okay. So not to get into too much of us, this is just some of our offices that are around the city, but one of the ones that I like to always bring up is the one here in the middle called CUPS. We've partnered with CUPS just last year to do free dentistry every Thursday with the CUPS environment with people that really need the need. Unfortunately, CUPS is closed. Our dental clinics is closed at CUPS, you know, just hopefully for the short term, just with all the stuff that's going on in the city. But it's been a huge part of who we are and things that we can do. So let's just take a look. I always like to talk about my why, and it's motivating people to live well and give back, which works perfectly in what Abe and Connie have put together here is living well. How do we live well, and how do we make sure that we get to give back while doing it, even in these challenging times? Giving back is still so important. So this is me. I always like to talk a little bit about me, only because it gives you some insight into what we're about to talk about. And so you can see that picture in the middle. I actually have a 5-week-old. So we had a COVID baby. He's 5 weeks old, and his brother's 2 years old. Top left, Connie mentioned Guatemala. That was me and a few of my teammates, a few of our staff, a dentist, a hygienist, an assistant, and me. And we were able to see it. All those pieces of duct tape on the wall, those are all pieces of duct tape of people. Those are the people that we treated, and we want to remember them during that. Below that's our team here in Calgary. There's almost 200 strong, and I think physical fitness is a huge part of staying well. So people ask, what does TREC stand for? And the reason I bring it up today is I think it's actually important in everything we're about to talk about. Teamwork. We will not get through this if we don't work together. And that's where, again, Abe and Connie bringing this team together of people that can help us get through some of this. Respecting each other through the process. We talk about exceptional dentistry, but I think you can talk about exceptional, whatever makes you exceptional. And the fact that we can continue and get better every single day is our focus. And that's where these webinars, I think, have been so powerful. I mean, there's been a lot of webinars happening, over the time that we've been at home, and it allows us all to get better and to work with each other to get better. So living with an infinite mindset. Here's something that I think is really important as we go through this, is that we were going to get through this. There is no question that there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. And I think, some of this concept comes from Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, and it talks about, optimism and the light at the end of the tunnel. We have to be realistic with what we're dealing with, but we have to know that there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and that we can get through this, and we can get better, and we will heal through this. But while we're doing that, how are we going to manage what is actually happening? So we need to build some trust. And here's where I think this all starts with, and this has already been mentioned a couple of times by the two speakers before me, is creating an area of safety, the circle of safety. This is what our teams, what our families, what our friends, what the people around us, even the people that we don't know. I mean, I think that this has come up more in the last 3, 4, 7 days, as we see what's going on across the country and across the United States, is it creating a circle of safety where we can go out and feel safe in what we're doing, where we can go and talk to our team members and feel safe, and we can have the people around us and really building that. Because in the end, that's what we are looking for from anybody around us. We're looking for that from our government. We're looking at that from our teams. We're looking at that from the police and the EMS and all the people that are keeping us safe during this time. And we all look at these things differently, but we reach for safety. And if you can create a safe environment, people will come to you. People will be attracted to you because that is why they are there. Yes, they work for you because you employ them and you pay them, but they can work for somebody else. They can leave you to go somewhere else. But the reason they stay is because they feel safe in the environment that they're in. So how do we create these healthy relationships? And some of you will have seen this, A Pyramid of Trust. It's actually by Patrick Lencioni, so I did not create this myself, 5 Dysfunctions of Team. And they talk about trust being the most important. Well, how do you build a trusting relationship? It's through vulnerability. And I think that the biggest challenge with business, and let's go in because I'm going to come from really the business side of things, is that business owners and people in businesses are not allowing themselves to be vulnerable. One of the things that we did is we started, we had to lay off 120 people all within a day. And then we had to figure out how to rehire them all. And then, through the governments, we've been able to do that. And we actually managed to hire our teams right back to the day that we let them go. But, not knowing the answer to a lot of questions was challenging. And where our team got to see my vulnerability, and I think it's really important, is I did not know all the answers. And so I created a video almost every evening and sent it out to all of our team members and said, here's where we're at, here's what we're figuring out, and here's what we don't know. And I don't know everything, and I'm not going to be perfect at this, but I'm going to do my best to protect you as we go through this. And I think that's where the amount of feedback that we got back from our teams when those videos came out was them understanding that it goes through the entire organization. None of us have ever been here before. I mean, maybe you could say our grandparents, if they'd still been around long enough to experience one of these larger plagues, but realistically, none of us have ever experienced what we're now going through. And so we don't have all the answers, but that's okay, because if we trust each other through the process and we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we'll figure it out. And we have to have open, honest conversations. Nobody loves conflict, but to get through this, we're not going to know all the answers. Our team members are going to help us figure out these answers. And it takes courage to tell your boss or somebody next to you that maybe you're doing this wrong. Maybe we could do this differently. And we open that, and we're open to that conflict and conversation because we don't know how to do this. But it comes with commitment, and we need to be dependable. And once we come up with an idea that's going to be important to us, we need to commit to that idea. We need to come together and really, I don't think it's accountability. I think it's integrity, and I don't think it's results. I think it's service. We need to come together to serve each other, to be of service to each other. I mean, the mayor, I think, says this better than anybody, but working with each other, open hearts, like helping each other, being kind during this time. But how do we last? How do we make it through this? And that's where adaptability and diversity are the two big factors. We need to be able to pivot. The exact name of this conversation. We have to be adaptable to what's going on there because we won't make it otherwise. And diversity. I mean, I don't think diversity has come up more often than in this last week of, what do things look like? I read this one kind of, it was almost a meme, and it said, the companies are talking about diversity and the importance of what's going on. But take a picture of your board of directors and show us what they look like. Are they diverse? If you look at our core group, you'll find a significant diversity in our group. But diversity is important because we need people from all walks of life, all ethnicities, all backgrounds, because we won't make it if we don't get everybody's opinion. And here's one of the kind of final concepts that I'll go through. It's the 3 brains. I know I'm going through a lot. When Connie said 3 hours, when I have a presentation, I like to take about between 2 and 3 hours to go through everything. So we could fill a lot more time. But we know we have a brain in our head. We know we have this part of our gut that people talk about a lot is making our gut healthier. But we also have this brain in our heart, and we don't always talk about the brain in our heart. So how do we make sure that we take care of all 3 aspects of our brain? And I talk about recharge, energy, and connect. We need to recharge every single day. And whether that means to you nature, contemplation, mindfulness, gratitude, prayer, whatever that means to you, but building that level of resilience for yourself to start at a real basis. And then we need energy. We need to move. We need to move every single day. One of the big challenges that a lot of people have is as they get, as things get more difficult, as we start to see ourselves and we start to get this heavy piece on us that we're not able to deal with because we've been unemployed or because we don't have all these pieces. The first thing we stop doing is walking and moving and getting out there. And look, the weather is beautiful. We know the gyms are closed. I actually own a gym. And it's frustrating to know that the gyms are closed and we understand the reason why. But we can open up restaurants and we can open up things that may not make us healthier necessarily. But getting to the gym is something that will make us more resilient every single day. If you are healthier, you are happier, and you are more resilient. And so, we need to figure out how to get outside and experience the weather and do that better. And then we need to look at our nutrition. And the Canada Health Guide finally came out with, just last year, I believe, a food guide that actually makes sense. It looks nothing like the one that it did before because it didn't have all the lobbyists, involved in it. And I won't get into this. You can look this up yourself. But here's the last piece, connect. What we know is that we use phones more often than we ever have. And, I called a friend of mine just recently and his voicemail actually said, if you want to get a hold of me faster, send me a text message. And I'm like, if I wanted to text you, I would have. I called you because I wanted to talk to you because I text and email you all the time. We need to connect. And one of the things that we know about mental well-being is that when people start to get into a even mildly depressive state. And I'm not going to pretend to know that much about depression, but when you start to get away from that, because there's a clinical side to this, and there's a part of this that just starts to happen when we're isolated from each other. But when people want to connect with each other, or when people start to get depressed, they tend to spend more time at home. They tend to disconnect from people. And one of the things that I bring up with people is at the end of your day, when I talk to people, how was your day? The first thing most people say is, I'm tired. It was a long day. But you get to Friday and you've worked your entire week and all of a sudden you're like, let's go out with our friends. Let's go do stuff. And I'm like, well, aren't you tired? You were tired yesterday and the day before and the day before that, but you got to Friday, you worked your entire week. It drives my wife nuts because I'm like, hey, going to the boys to play poker. And she's like, you can't make it to 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. on a regular day. And you'll be out till 1 or 2 in the morning hanging out with your buddies. It's because we're connecting in real life with people. And that connection piece is so important. And when somebody says, I'm tired, what do you need to say to them? Let's go for a walk. Let's get out in nature. Let's connect with you because you're not tired because you're exhausted. You're tired because you're not connecting.
That's so good, Dr. Jan. I'm just wondering, I know you probably have a lot more and the comments have been incredible. People are finding this very, very valuable. What would be one thing you would love to leave us with today?
Connect and give back. And this is my last slide. And there you can see the mayor on this slide. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the partnership walk this year because we couldn't do that. And I'm the chair for the walk. And we raised $1 million last year to help people. That was an overseas thing. But do whatever you can to give back in your community, locally, internationally, any way you can. Just take the ability. And if you can, do something to help people and to give back.
Well said. Well said. Thank you, Dr. Jan. I actually heard from a psychologist yesterday that our brain doesn't know the difference between giving or receiving. It's the same. And so you're offering us something very valuable for our mental.
And there's one third part of that is giving and receiving, but also if somebody watches you give or receive, they also get the same benefit. So when you give something to somebody, they receive, you receive, but the person that experiences that gets to see it happen, they also receive. And so it's actually a 3-prong. It's not just a 2-prong approach when you get to give.
So good. Well, I hope everyone's inspired to move forward with your health and to give something today. I love that. Actually, we have an opportunity to give today, which Abe will tell you about later. But thank you, Dr. Jan. We just love everything that you're doing. You're a phenomenal leader in our community. I want to introduce our next speaker, Bruce Edgelow. Sorry, Bruce, I know your name. It's me, not you. Bruce is a managing partner and founder of EdgeMark Capital, an advisory service, Inc. He's also board director or board chair for several nonprofits, one of them being Calgary Health Trust. And he's a member of the Alberta government's Mental Health and Addictions Advisory Council. Bruce is a dynamo. You cannot talk to Bruce without leaving energized and full of hope and full of just being willing to push through the hard. And so we welcome you, Bruce. Feel free to share what's on your heart with us today.
Thank you. I'll try and live up to that. I got 15 minutes, so here we go. So thank you, Connie and Abe, for the opportunity to be here. And on the mental health and addictions, just really jazzed that Stacey and Minister Luan are members. Stacey's the co-chair on the addiction side related to mental health and addiction. And the reality of what we're doing with COVID, I understand that have this information from reasonably good sources, that the unfortunate downside of 911 and just the whole notion of the ambulatory piece that across Canada, in fact, it's probably more than Canada, but across Canada, while the calls related to accidents and those types of things are well down just because of inactivity, what we're not talking about is this notion that the suicide and domestic abuse calls have spiked as a result of COVID. Is that the people are very much at edge, that we're putting people into this, into a place where those incidents are way up. And so this whole place that we can find ourselves, and I really appreciate Dr. Jaffer's earlier comments of where do we go to get that place of safety and peace. And it's certainly in this notion of pivot. How do I pivot in this place? I am being challenged at all fronts, but try to give you some sense of what alongside others and the pivot piece. And as I mentioned to Connie yesterday, I get probably 15 to 20 emails every morning in my inbox, places that I go to for snippets of information. I'll very quickly. So Mark Kolke, 1 minute, his Monday morning minute. So Mark's comment for us on Monday is, consider our position today as intergalactical travelers at Earth's arrival's gate, forewarned about COVID-19. Where should we stake our claim? What enterprise deserves our bets, investments, and activities and efforts? To do what we've always done, or what we've never done, or something we've always dreamt of doing? Rules changing, landscape shifting beneath everyone's feet. The only firm foundation for our future is the new one we build now. Go, do, and lead. Or you can follow, but take care on choosing who you follow. It's a two-part choice. Which leader to follow and trust the directions. Best plans are flexible, but Mark's advice is first, make your plan. And he always ends this with a quote. And the quote for Monday was, the art of war teaches us to rely not on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him. Not on the chance of his not attacking, but rather on the fact that we have made our position unassailable. It's a really great advice from Mark for Monday. Another place I go to is Smart Brief. It's a really cool piece that comes into my inbox almost every day. So smart strategic leadership, what it means today. And Dave Caffaro offered up some advice on Monday's brief. And strategic leadership means leading for today, tomorrow, and beyond. Strategic leadership recognizes the next stages of a new normal will be iterative. Can read it, can't say it. Warren Buffett, it was an interesting quote he provides. He said, Buffett once wrote that you only find out who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. The current low tide environment calls for strategic leadership. The coronavirus event helped us see new strengths and development needs within the organization, including observations about the overall business model. There's a lot that we can't control or influence. Let's take what we can impact and start shaping a future that helps team members see how their work connects to the organization's future state as you lead through the new normal. Another piece was the failure of imagination and belief will hold us back. Roger Bannister's feat of running a mile in under 4 minutes in 1954 almost immediately sparked other runners to do the same thing, suggesting that a failure of imagination and belief was in play. Our job as managers and leaders is to instill the belief that whatever core mission you're pursuing is possible and valuable. So one of the places related to a pivot is the check-in personally. I find that, am I up for the challenge? I have a huge faith. And in that faith element, I believe that I've been given talents and gifts, and that I have dreams and desires, and I ought to be pursuing them as opposed to being half glass empty. I ought to be half glass full. So how do I actually go and achieve that? One thing that just came out recently, February the 14th, John Eldridge, who's one of my favorite authors, launched a new book, Getting Your Life Back. And within the foreword in chapter 1 of John's book, he introduced it's an app. It's called the 1 Minute Pause, or the Pause. And again, I'm not here to push my faith, but it's a faith element for me, but it's akin to going and getting your chi, going and getting centered. So John's developed this app that I use on a regular basis. Every day, I find myself in this place of overwhelmness, anxiety, trying to move through things that are really absolutely hard to do. So I go onto the app, and sometimes it's a minute, 3, 5, or 10, and depends how much time, and depends how fussed I am. But it really is this notion of going and getting refocused, of quieting myself. What am I up to do? What am I trying to do? And then how do I ought to do it? And not to get taken out, but to get recentered and refocused. And so being up for the challenge. One of the critical pieces is, where's my team at? So as I examine myself, who have I got at the table that I need to pivot with? Where are they at? And one of the places we often are doing now is within social media and the calls, my business partner and I, we spend time on all of our calls with our clients, speaking first, how are you doing? How are you doing personally? How's your family doing? How's your extended family doing? And then how's your team doing? it's that place of checking in with us and having, going back to the earlier comment, I love the comment of being able to develop this place of trust and vulnerability. Because if we're not leading from a place of trust and vulnerability, it's hard to have those critical conversations. So an encouragement is to find a way to be vulnerable, lead by example. Again, find out where your team's at, and do you have the right players at the table with respect to the team? Who might be involved or affected by a pivot? Personally, your team, your family, your capital providers. Have you gone to the place where I raised money, or I had a notion I was going to do this, and all of a sudden COVID has caused me to have to be absolutely somewhere different? So who do I need to check in? Are there critical shareholders? Are there critical strategic advisors? Are there bankers that I need to go with? Have I raised money in the marketplace against a certain place that I was doing and realizing, you know what, I can't achieve my business plan this year? I've got to check in. I got to go and figure out what I need to do differently. And are those critical conversations? And I would suggest that in the world of banking, and as you look at the second quarters coming out and the banks reserving a lot more capital for potential loan losses, they welcome those conversations sooner than later with respect to the things that you need to do. And this whole notion of how do I go where I've never been? I mean, that exactly that is like, gee, I've stalled out. I need to pivot. How do I go where I've never been? So it's really check in with your team. Anybody got some thoughts? Where might we look to deploy our technology differently than we're currently different? Is there another market? Going back to Connie and Abe's piece related to this notion of coaches and mentors. Who have I not got at the table with me with respect to the ability to add in value? It goes back to my 20-some emails I get every morning. The little snippets of information I can go and get, and to try to be discerning with respect to the place that I got to get some information that I don't currently have. Try to find a place that goes back to the hockey analogy. We've missed hockey since March, but Gretzky's common theme was Gretzky talked about this notion of not be where the puck is, but where the puck's going. So where might opportunities exist for me to take what I've got and move differently? There's no easy answer here. There truly isn't. But it's that courage that you have within you to say, we ought to go and try this. I don't want to be jammed. I don't want to be caught unaware. I'm feeling that this momentum that we have has truly stalled out, and I'm at risk. I'm at risk personally. I'm at risk with my team. I'm at risk with my capital providers. I'm at risk with my family. So how do I find a way to move through this differently? And it truly is, as some of the earlier comments, it's around that community. How do we move forward differently? How do I pull myself up? How do I grab a hold of my bootstraps and lead by example? And it's not easy. It truly is not easy, but it is doable. It is doable. And we want to be an encourager for others around this place, is to find a way to move through these places differently than you've ever been able to thought you could do it before. And Connie, I think those are the notes that I'd made with respect to how do we want to do this. We're, again, checking in personally, your team. Do I have the right players? Who else do I need to have at the table? And you're getting really good coach and mentors to help you along that. And again, get really focused and centered personally. Because if we're fraught with anxiety and lack of trust in our own selves, that shows up, that truly does. And so finding a way to move forward in a sincere way, being vulnerable has already been stated by another speaker. Just that will build confidence in, hey, yeah, we don't have all the answers, we truly don't, but we're trying to move through this differently. I'll just close with that, Connie.
Thank you so much, Bruce. That was just awesome. And, we're so grateful for, a man like you with, a long and storied career in business, but who really also understands mental health and based on what you said today, how critical it is that we pay attention to that we take care of it, that we own it. And so thank you so much from the heart, because we're so grateful that you took your time today. We know also that you're serving on a panel with the Alberta government to give them advice. And so as an Albertan, that makes me feel good, because I think you're probably going to give them some great advice. So thank you so much, Bruce. That's fantastic. And yeah, absolutely. Well, all the panelists will give you a big hand, and it's great, and so moving right along, and thanks for all of our speakers. Really, they've got so much to share, and doing such a skillful job of keeping it, within our time frame. And, right now, it's really my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. And we've been hearing a little bit about Connie here, and Connie, Jacob, and I have the pleasure of working together at Wellness Innovate. And, you could say a lot about Connie in terms of, education and work history, but I think there are a few people who combine both passion and compassion in the unique way that Connie does. And compassion is a little different, right? I mean, passion is about being passionate about a cause, being driven, and yet compassion is about how you are with people. And I'm so grateful to be working with Connie, and she's a senior manager of well-being at Wellness Innovate. And so just going to give you a hand, Connie, and welcome you to share today.
Well, thanks so much, Abe. It honestly is such an honor to walk alongside people right now and to work with someone like Abe at Wellness Innovate, who is also extremely compassionate and passionate about what we do. And we bring people together right now, not for any other reason than we just have to respond. We have to respond right now. And Bruce, you just got me fired up. Thank you for everything that you shared. And I wanna just add to that conversation and reflect on a couple of times in my life where I have had to pivot. I mean, like I said, we've never done these waters before. We've never traveled them, but we have overcome things. And I've owned two different companies. One I owned in Vancouver. It was a social enterprise working with youth at risk right in the heart of East Vancouver. I was living my dream. I loved it. It was every ounce of who I was extended in this business of really helping youth at risk through hip hop. I owned my own hip hop studio. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, now there's a gangster. I knew it. That white girl, that's a gangster. But I loved it. I loved working with all kinds of different youth out there, and we were growing, and we were granted so much favor in the community, and we were making a difference in people's lives. And then one day, my father passed away, and we had just a family tragedy that brought us back to Calgary. And I thought, well, I'm not going down without a fight. I'm going to hire a manager and keep this business alive. And here I was in Calgary. The business is going. We're getting prepared for the fall, which is where you launch all these programs. And I had just had our oldest son. And I am sitting there with postpartum depression and exhausted. And I get a phone call from my manager saying that they had been locked out of the building and she quit. And my business died right there and there that day, just gone. Everything I had built for, gone. And perhaps you know exactly how that feels. You might be on this webinar or watching on our Facebook Live, and you've lost your business or you're about to lose your business. I was in despair for a couple of years after, because I had put so much of my own identity in my business. And through a couple of years of just really digging through the pain and the grief and the hardship of losing something that I had invested in, it felt like a baby itself. I remember coming out of that, because you will come out thinking, I am not my job. I am not my business. Since when does my entire foundation rest on what I've built? That's very shaky ground, because as we are noticing these things that we build, I mean, they come and they are taken away, and it shows us fragility of life, but it also shows us that we are resilient and creative. I remember a couple of years later, I was very surprised. People just started coming into my life, and I started another business. One of my business partners is on this call, and we built a company that was more than I could have ever dreamed my other company in Vancouver was ever. It was more than I would have expected. And we did such amazing work here in our city. We got to produce theater work, which is another big passion of mine. One of my favorite shows we produced was on poverty, and really diving into what does poverty look like in the city of Calgary. And we compared someone who is, in debt and living off their line of credit with those who are experiencing homelessness. And poverty has been a real passion of mine to study in my resilience work, because really, what's our poverty? We're all experiencing the poverty of the soul, and when a pandemic hits, it really sheds off a lot of things in our life that we thought we could lean on. We thought that was a foundation, and when it gets moved, it reveals that maybe that wasn't a real firm foundation. And for me, building this new business just brought so much life, and it reminded me that when something dies, something else will always come. Whatever state your business is in right now, whether it's going to thrive eventually, or whether you're just making it, or whether you're about to lose it, I want to remind you that through losing things, we often gain what was really supposed to be ours in the first place. You are not your job. You are not your business. You're so much more than that. I really learned that through losing, through surrender, through grief. And the foundation that I got to build inside of me in those times was substantial, and it has grounded me. I didn't realize that a couple of years later, I would have to ground myself even further. My oldest son, became hospitalized for suicide at age 8, if you can believe that. Age 8. It was the hardest experience we've ever had in our lives. And now I couldn't work. I couldn't do what I normally did. I had to come home. I had to homeschool him. I've never homeschooled anybody. And maybe many of you are in that place right now. You're being put in this position of not only having to work, but school your children from home, and you're worried about income. That was my life 4 years ago. And so I pivoted again, and I got creative, because I want to remind you that you are creative because you are human. You have the ability to be creative just because you're human. When we're not creative, when we're living in the back of our brain, when the amygdala has taken over, we're living back here, we can't be creative because we're worried, we're full of fear, we're filled with scarcity, we're just trying to grasp on to whatever we can, and it becomes very hard to be creative. And the mind literally does need to rest. Rest is a great business strategy, to be able to sit back for a few moments or even a few months and reflect and get grounded on, who am I? Who am I outside of what I do? Because who you are is not what you do. And what do I really value? What do I stake in the ground for my life? What am I here for, on purpose, in this moment of history? For some reason, here we are living in a pandemic. You've been placed here. I've been placed here. What is our role right now? And we can get really firmly planted in those things, which is what really brings resilience. Belonging creates resilience. And that belonging that we root into in the moments that we've been given where there's a pause is extremely important. And it allows us to take a step back and look at what has been really happening. When we're in the thick of it, you can't see it. But when you take a step back, you can. And I remember, hiring people to do my work. Hiring people to do what I was doing, and I was able to pivot again. And then just recently, just September, I got that gut feeling that this business that I had built over 12 years now, that I was done. And I want to remind us all that there are seasons in our lives. We often just think, go, 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 push, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. And I think if anything we've learned in this pandemic is that is just no way to live. If the land itself has to rest in order to produce harvest, then why do we think we're any different? Because we are children of the world, we're children of the land, we are humans living on planet Earth, and if the earth has to rest, well, so do we. And I remember getting that gut feeling, just knowing that my time was up. But I didn't know what I would do. This is what I've done for 20 years. And a lot of people are facing that very question. What I have done for the last 20, 30, 40 years of my life is now gone. I can't reinvent myself right now. Well, to that I say, friends, you're not here to reinvent yourself. You're here to resurrect yourself again, back to who you really are, coming back to those values and who you are. That never dies. Reinventing yourself does sound like a lot of stress. I'm 45 years old. I do not want to reinvent myself right now. I want to resurrect what's been dead inside of me, that's been sitting there dormant, maybe not activated. And so I took a big leap of faith, and I resigned from my company with no job, with no income, had no idea what I was going to do. And I even tried to get a job at Indigo, and they wouldn't hire me. Can you believe this? I mean, I couldn't even get a job at a bookstore. I thought working at a bookstore for a couple of months sounded lovely. I didn't want to lead anything. I just wanted to sit in a really nice place and help people discover good books. And they wouldn't even hire me. But then I remembered that our greatest resource is not our skills, even though they're important. They're not our business sense, and it's not even money. Our greatest resource is people. That is our greatest resource. And so I took a big risk, and I called up my friend, Abe Brown, and I said, Abe, in my resilience research, I have noticed that the greatest culture change that's going to happen for our youth is not necessarily going to come from me helping the youth themselves, at least at this point in my life. It's going to be to change the workplace. We have to change the workplace, we have to change homes, and then our youth are going to be okay. And I said, I know that you've got something going on in that. Do you think we could collaborate? Well, here we are now in June. And Abe took a risk, and I took a risk calling him. And here I am, because I remembered that people are my greatest resource. And I phoned up a friend, and here we are. And so I want to remind you that, who do you know? Bruce mentioned this. Who do you know? Who can you reach out to? We have to be willing to ask for help. We can't do this alone. And so many of us, pride tells us, oh, I can't show my weakness. I would never tell anyone that I tried to get a job at Indigo. I keep that hush hush. I'm never going to tell someone that I skip the dishes at night just to make it. We need to start reaching out. We need to start telling real stories, because people are tired. They're tired of seeing the shiny. They're like, would somebody please get real with me and show me the way, take my hand and walk me through this. I want to also just mention that there are things that have always been there that we don't notice when the rug has been taken out from underneath us. Zoom is one of those things that has always been there, at least in the last couple of years. I've known about it. I'm sure you've known about it. But I never realized how impactful it could be. What has always been there that you haven't noticed yet, because we were buried in our own work and in our comfort and in our own habitual practices of the way we do things. I just released a book in a pandemic. Not a great time to release a book, and I was going to do a physical book release, and of course that got canceled. And then I remembered this thing called Zoom. I thought, well, what if I did my book release on Zoom? What if I actually not only did a book release, but because my book release is help for parents with mental health, what if I invited psychologists who I greatly admire to be a part of my book launch, and we actually add value to parents right now? And then I thought, what if I upgrade my Zoom and we get 500 people on this thing? Guess what? We got 500 people at my book launch because I saw something that's always been there that I didn't realize before. So what's there right now for you that's always been there? My friend works at Honda at the national office, and at night he goes and he works for Skip the Dishes, and he makes more money right now with Skip the Dishes than he does at Honda. Skip the Dishes has always been there. He saw an opportunity to get some more cash flow right now, to get himself ahead. What's there for you? I want to remind you today that you are not your position, you're not your job, you're not your business. You are so much more than that. You have an opportunity to get grounded, to take a step back and to see what's going on, the view of the land. Rest is a business strategy. And I also want to remind you that you are creative, your gut will speak to you, and what's been there that's always been there that you didn't notice until now. And I want to remind you that you are so brave and courageous, and you're going to make it.
Wow, that's awesome. That was really, really good. Fantastic. And thank you so much for that, Connie. Hey, that was just great. What an incredible way of modeling pivoting through the whole process. And, you know, it's interesting because people can talk about it, but it's nice to hear from someone who's done it. So thanks for that, Connie. I love Skip the Dishes. You know, my son said to me, he's 20, he said, with Skip the Dishes and Netflix, I'm good for a couple more years, you know, but happy to announce that with the reopening, he's back to work as of actually last week, and he's pretty happy about that. So thanks so much, Connie. And, you know, we're really, really thrilled. I'm personally really thrilled. My wife is to be working with you, and we're grateful for your many contributions. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. You know, this is a young lady who I've known for some time, back when I was in the nonprofit sector working with the Calgary Drop-In Center and also with In From the Cold. I got to know Julie. Julie's title, I can't exactly remember, but she was in charge of a lot when it came to Alberta Health Services, and particularly a lot of the resources around mental health and addiction. And as I got to know Julie, I have to say she was so instrumental in shifting a much more sort of person-centered approach. And I know that many people I've talked to have said that Alberta's health services and the government, there's been a realignment and a better focus. And I think Julie, you know, actually behind the scenes was responsible for a lot of that, made that happen, certainly in our region. And now Julie is the executive director of Hull Services, and they are a very large nonprofit that does so much good work in our community, particularly with youth and families. And so Julie, really honored to hear from you here today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Abe. I'm really excited to be here. I've really enjoyed the variety of presentation that we've seen so far. Connie, thanks for sharing your personal story of pivoting. It's amazing. And I think you're going to see themes emerging from the various presenters through this day. So that's kind of cool when things build on each other and you start to see some common themes, because I think truth is always found when we can see the layering of people's experiences and common shared experiences. So I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Hull Services to pivot through this time. And I've divided the presentation into some pieces, but I want to start by talking about how important it is during times of uncertainty and change just to really dig deep and double down on your core mandate. What we do at Hull Services, I think, is really important work. We provide mental health and family support services to children, youth, and their families, both campus-based services where kids come and live with us and receive really intensive services for periods of time, and community-based services. And a lot of our services, the vast majority, are actually delivered through large contracts through government-funded agencies like Children's Services, Alberta Health Services. It was nice to see Jason again today. And through the Calgary Board of Education, the United Way, through the city. So it was nice to see the mayor always. And so we've continued to try to deliver our core services with excellence and creativity, and emphasis on the two words, excellence and creativity, because excellence often requires creativity. And we always know that our staff, our people are really strong and creative and smart, but we've been able to see it in spades in a way that we hadn't maybe even imagined. And so I just wanted to give you a few examples of the ways we've continued to deliver core services in really different ways from normal. I'll talk about the biggest difference maybe, which is our Braiding the Sweetgrass program, which is a program designed to work with Indigenous families. It brings in elders to work with Indigenous families to try to interrupt the patterns of intergenerational violence and trauma. And that group, of all the groups, you think, oh, how can they do this during a pandemic when we're not allowed to have face-to-face services? And it's just been amazing to watch elders hold virtual sessions with families and talking about really traditional ways of doing and being within families, but doing that using really modern technology and still being able to feel like they're doing that in a good way. It's been really amazing to watch that. We've had, you know, our folks who work with transitional aged youth who normally do work experience and support programs like teaching kids how to cook, develop online cooking classes where a box of supplies gets dropped off, the ingredients, and then they all go online together and cook their meal together and then sit down virtually and eat a meal together so that people aren't finding themselves lonely while they're eating their meals. There have been care packages delivered to supportive roommates and their youth that live with them to encourage them to be connecting with one another through games and through shared activities. Practical things like instructions around sanitation and housekeeping to support good health and hygiene during this time of COVID. We've been able to realign our school-based staff when schools were closed to face-to-face services and redeploy those people out into our group services to provide support to learners learning in their home settings, to provide extra cleaning and sanitation supports to programs who are trying really hard to manage all these kids suddenly within close quarters with one another and needing to do extra cleaning. And we've been able to completely avoid any cases of COVID in any of our programs so far. We're so grateful for that. And I think that's been a testament to how people have redeployed themselves and worked outside of their job descriptions to really be supportive of one another. We've been able during this time of COVID to launch a new 5-bed program for children under the age of 13 to provide extra supports to families that are in crisis at this time. Our pre-adolescent treatment program was able to add day program spots for families that are feeling the stress and the strain of suddenly being with their kids all the time and needing additional supports. So I've been really thinking about how important it is as an organization to leave a margin available to us to think about where is there room to move, where is there physical infrastructure, where is the capacity to be able to do something different during times of uncertainty and change. And it's really important, I think, if you don't have that currently in your organization, to be thinking about where's your margin to be able to make room for the unexpected and being really responsive to unexpected situations. How have we been able to do all of this? Well, it's all been done through our people. We know everything meaningful that we do is done through people. And so we've been really focused on supporting our people during this time. Through that, we've been trying to be really flexible with folks, really compassionate, focused on providing a safe and healthy workplace and not asking people to do things that would put themselves at unnecessary risk or in higher jeopardy. We've been really focusing on resilience and well-being and providing additional support groups and those kinds of things to folks to help them focus on their own well-being at this time. And that's been an enabler, I think, for them to really be focused on their work and feeling free to be creative and to use up that margin that we have to do really great things. The other thing we've been trying to do is keep our eyes up and out. And so as much as we want to dig deep and double down internally on our mandate, we want to keep our eyes up and out and look around to our external partners and our friends and our supporters in the community to understand how we can be a support to them and helpful to them at this time. We've taken extra care for our friends and donors. We've done things like when people were coming back from being away and having to self-isolate and didn't have people to help them, we would take our donors, you know, we go shopping for them and take them their food and their cleaning supplies and the things that they needed to be okay to self-isolate for a time. We've been making extra calls to our donors and friends to ask, how are you? Is there anything we can be doing for you during this difficult time? We've deliberately been providing resources. So we've been doing emails and postings to our website and to social media, really trying to point people to supports for their own mental health and well-being, to really help people understand what we know because of the work we do about brain science, the impacts of trauma on the brain, how to regulate, how to connect with people, how to do things that will help you cope and be resilient during times of crisis. And so while we do that internally for the people we're meant to serve, it's also really important to look up and out and do that for your partners and the broader community as well. We've had the opportunity to use Zoom technology and to do webinar kinds of things. We're a flagship organization for the Child Trauma Academy, and Bruce Perry has been doing some interviews with our own Dr. Emily Wong and talking about the brain science and helping people understand neurosequential approaches to keeping their brains healthy and keeping themselves resilient during this time. All of this has really been predicated and dependent on a focus on our mission and our vision. Connie, I gave you that one slide. If you don't mind putting that up, that would be helpful at this time, because we've invested a lot of time in the last year or so taking the time to do what Connie advised individuals to do, and that is figure out who you are outside of your work, or who are you first, and then how does that inform what you do. And we've been taking time to do that as an organization as well. We really developed our mission and our vision for what it is we want to do. And so you'll see it on the screen here, I think, and there it is. And so our vision is to have resilient young people and families thriving within communities that support their mental health and well-being. Well, what an opportunity we have right now during this time of pandemic to think about how we contribute to the resilience of young people and their helping our communities to thrive in a way that maybe is a bit more upstream and less waiting for people to come to us with problems, and trying to be more proactive about helping people have the skills they need to cope right now. So we partner with young people and families, building resilience today, always with that hope for a brighter tomorrow, which keeps a real hope lens on things for us. And then we've been really trying to be really intentional about living out our values. And you'll see what our values are there. We've been talking a lot about our values during this time, and about how what we do during this time of COVID reflects our values. We've been trying really hard to act in accordance with our organizational commitments. We promised as part of our strategic directions to our people that we would be committed to building respectful relationships, holding space for authentic dialogue, and working effectively together. So we've been doing things. Thanks, Connie. I think that, you know, you can take that down if you want, and people can access that later if they'd like. But we've been talking about how do we stay in contact with people and have a clear line of sight to everyone who works in our organization. We're an organization of just over 600 employees and about 500 volunteers. We've been doing bi-weekly Zoom virtual town halls, we're calling them. And we've had attendance well over 100 at each of those sessions, with lots of feedback from people about how important it is for them to see our leaders during this time, to feel seen by them, to have the opportunity to interact and ask questions. And I'll tell you, we've had more interaction during these virtual meetings than we've ever had in a face-to-face town hall, and lots of requests from people to keep this modality going afterwards. And so there's some unintended positive outcomes. We're learning about things we want to hang on to after COVID that have been enabled by this time in a different way. So finally, I just want to say, by focusing on our mission and our vision, knowing who we are as an organization, living our values every day, and acting in accordance with our commitments, we are and have been pivoting now toward aspirational components of our strategic goals. So where maybe normally day to day we're in the trenches focused on downstream service delivery with really intensive services and supports to people who are mandated to us through government services, we're now having the capacity to look up and to think, ooh, what can we do right now really proactively that meets that long-term strategic goal that we've been holding aspirationally, to intervene earlier in the trajectory of people's illnesses, to have an influence and an impact on the greater community of Calgary and on society, contributing to research and to knowledge and understanding of brain science and what works well for people who've experienced trauma. And by taking this opportunity, we've actually been able to, I think, move further toward the aspirational parts of our strategic directions than we would have been able to do in a time of non-crisis, because we now see the opportunity to be a real benefit to our community during a significant time of distress for those around us. And, you know, to someone else earlier, we have to respond, there's no choice. And so it's pushing us out of our comfort zone and teaching us how we can have more of an influence and raise our profile and share our knowledge and our expertise more than we ever have before. There are new funding opportunities that have surfaced because of COVID around mental health supports, and we're applying against some of those funds to be able to really beef some of those more proactive kinds of services that don't normally get funded through government contracts, and to think about how we have an influence with the broader, wider community. And we've been engaging in work like I Got Mind with Bob Wilkie, the former NHL player, and speaking about the role of parents and coaches with athletes, and trying to think about where are those normative audiences that are now kind of captive, literally, because they're isolating and they're not doing their normal things. Where are the opportunities to have visibility and to teach and to learn about what they need and to try to be responsive? So those were my notes. That's what I wanted to talk about today. I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and the other thing I want to talk about is funding at this time, and I appreciate the fact that you very generously have created this opportunity for folks to be aware of us and to contribute. And we're also being really creative about fundraising activities, and how do you replace your big event normally have face-to-face. And it's been really fun to watch teams be creative that way, because if we don't figure out sustainable ways to manage funding, that will limit our opportunities to have an impact. So all of that has been really exciting, and we think this opportunity will present things we never imagined before, and will actually maybe bless the day that a pandemic happened and it forced us to think differently about who we are as an organization and how we can make a difference.
Wow, so good. Thank you so much, Julie. And
thanks.
What a great talk, and so nice to hear. That it's not just for profit, but also not for profit that are having to make a pivot at this particular time. It's so critical. And, near the end of our conference together, so about 30 minutes from now, we're going to show you, how you could specifically contribute to Hull, along with, the executive director of our next, speaker right now. So I'm going to introduce to you, I'll just throw it up on the screen, our next speaker. His name is Stacey Petersen. Stacey Petersen, is the executive director of Fresh Start. If I was to read his bio and all of his accomplishments, we would literally be here until 2 o'clock because Stacey has accomplished so much. Stacey is who I want to be when I grow up. And so on that note, I'm just going to turn it over to you, Stacey, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks a lot, Abe, and Connie for setting this up. I can't hear what I've got to say either, because really, a lot of it is just going to be on the spot. And I've done tons of speaking, and I've had PowerPoints and tons of notes and things like that, and spoke for hours. And I thought for today we've got 15 minutes. I think I don't know that I'll get the 15, but I'm somewhere close, and you can cut me off. But I have an immense amount of gratitude for all the other panelists. Everything that every one of you has said, something has resonated with me on that gut level. And my hope for you today is that I just want to be authentic and genuine with you. This whole Zoom platform, a lot of us are kind of zoomed out and all that. And what I loved about this is having the mayor and the minister and the executive directors and the owners and stuff like that is, we all put our pants on the same way. My dad used to say that. We all put our pants on the same way. There's no here and here. We're all in this thing together. And so, if you're sitting there and you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I want to be I want to be like them or whatever, stop it. What I would say to you is stop comparing yourself to others. If you recognize some of those good qualities that you see in our other speakers, the only reason why you can recognize them is because you have them. So I would say, have a look at yourself and just be like, yeah, I do have these things. And so, for me, with this, these go well or not, and it's completely contingent on my level of self-centeredness, right? How am I looking? How am I sounding, right? How's this? And that never goes well. What I want, I just want to come from that heartfelt space. And sometimes some of this is that we get to disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. So I talk about things that not everybody talks about. I talk about things like that a lot of you have spoke about. And I love that, you know, everyone talked about resiliency and the stuff. And so, yes, we've been through floods. We've had our butts handed to us in this oil market. I mean, all our events are canceled, our major fundraising events. And when you have to raise over 50% of your annual budget every year, I mean, you could be turtling in your office going, what am I going to do? Right? At the end of the day, I think the work that we have to do is far greater than all of us. So if I'm not in control, and if it's not all about me, what I need to do is be a steward and be a channel for some of the good stuff that's coming. And you know, but at the end of the day, I also want to say that, look, I'm not the guy that sits there and goes, well, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and you got to be stronger and do all those things. I mean, some of that is okay. But what I want to say is, like, this sucks. This sucks. I mean, Fresh Start Recovery Center, in my career, I've been here 16 years. I've been in this career over 30. I've been to over 300 funerals, and every single time it sucks. And when I have a parent sitting across from me and they say, you know, you know, what I got to say to them is, I don't want to know how you feel, but I can feel that pain. And there was some stuff, you know, around the whole COVID piece that we're at right now. You know, I've got 5 teenage daughters. They're all at home homeschooling. So, like, I'm really happy to be here today. I'm happy to be anywhere. No, I'm kidding. And part of the silver lining is that I get to be at home sometimes, you know, with them. And I love having them at home. So some of the stuff that I want to focus on really is it's about, for me, it's about choice. And for everybody else, whether we believe it or not, a little bit of a shout out to some of our panelists here. Our guests here. We've got Bridgewater Yoga. That's Lisa Simone from Fresh Start Recovery Center. We also have Wayne Steer in there. We've got some friends of ours, Venetia. But thanks to everybody for your time to come into this thing today. When I talk about choice, it's like, I mean, we've got these 2 frequencies in our lives every single day. Every single one of us wakes up in the morning and we have to choose between one of these 2 things that govern our actions. And sometimes it's up way ahead of you. Sometimes that brain's like, oh, good morning, I'm glad you're awake, right? Oh, you know, that little problem we have financially, that's going to suck today. And then we have this place that comes from our gut that says, it's going to be okay. We're not alone. We can do this together. But that's kind of the key, is that I have to put my choice in play. And people say, well, I don't have a choice. Yeah, we always have a choice. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean the things that we've got to choose from are great and great. It could be crappy and less crappy. But somewhere we got to make a choice, right? And if I can get out of the way of my head and I can trust in the process, like for Fresh Start, like for the people that I'm trying to serve, those ways are always presented. So I get to choose in the morning, how do I want to walk today? Do I walk in fear? It doesn't mean I just, you know, sweep it under the rug. I can acknowledge the fear and be like, yeah, you're a nasty bit of work, that. But I need to focus on the love that I've got over here. And so, yeah, I mean, you don't find people talking in boardrooms about love and everything. But I got to tell you, at Fresh Start Recovery Center, oftentimes we do. I mean, I say I love you to my staff all the time. They say that back. We encourage each other. And you know, we were deemed an essential service throughout all this. And so they were like, there were some of them that were pretty terrified throughout all this. Like, I mean, what am I going to do? And we can't just shut doors. And the people that are relying on us have compromised immune systems, et cetera. But they had to shift over to that space of, well, we're in it. And so what's the solution? I'm either going to be part of the problem and I'm going to be, you know, freaking out and creating more of that stuff, or I'm going to shift over to that loving space and be like, okay, how are we going to do this together? And you know, and I got to say that, you know, my team is the most phenomenal team in the world. And if your team isn't that to you, I know Jan's is, and I'm sure Julie's is. If you don't have that team, you should get a different gig. Now, coming from that, trying to come from that heartfelt space isn't always easy. It's really not, right? Because there's that cerebral part of say, how can I be hopeful when everything's on fire? Right? And the reality is there's 4 different parts to us. There's mental, emotional, physical, and there's spiritual. And if you don't think there's a spiritual part to you, you know, I mean, no, well, okay. But, you know, call it that inner voice, that intuition, that small child, God, creator, higher power, whatever that is that you want to. And my ego, our egos don't want us to connect to that. So what I practice throughout all of this, when my butt's on fire and I got to find solution and $250,000 goes out the door from events, I need to pause when agitated and look for a creative thought or an intuitive piece that gets us back on track. And it's amazing when I get out of the way and I step back, those solutions present themselves. Those solutions will present themselves. But if I'm a fear-based guy, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to be like, yeah, but what if that goes sideways? I can't. I can't be that risk adverse that I can't, you know, go after some of those things. So, you know, in my life and in this work, there's a huge amount of responsibility. Huge amount of responsibility. So I got to tell you, like, if it was all up to me, it'd be all over but the crime, right? I'd be like, well, let's build motorcycles, you know, and but the work is far greater than all of us. And so I heard someone had said this, and I thought it was brilliant. I think it might have been Lisa had put it up on our social media. It said, we're, you know, because at the beginning I was like, we're all in the same boat. No, we're not. We are not in the same boat. Man, I got a rubber dinghy that's got holes all over it. You got a yacht. We're all in the same storm. That's it. We're all in the same storm. So the times in my life, the time in your life when you feel the best about you are as a human being is when you're not thinking about yourself. So it works when all other methods fail. Reach out to help somebody else. Well, I can't. I don't have this. I don't have that. No, you have a lot. You actually have a lot. Go into your bathroom, look in that mirror, and look at yourself and say, man, you're amazing. And if you can take that energy into the world, I'm telling you that the solutions are going to present themselves for you. When I heard the term pivot, I'm like, pivot? That's kind of like a football player, right? When they're coming at you, you know? And so for me, like, again, I have to honor my feelings. The stuff that I'm going to focus on, that's going to grow. If I'm focusing on the shit, that's growing. If I'm focusing on the positive stuff, that's going to grow. Doesn't mean I'm in denial, but it means, like, I got to choose to go over here. And then one of the last bits is your feelings will not respect your need to look good. They will come up at any time in the middle of a football game. Last night with 4 men that I'm sitting with, and I start crying because I'm thinking about my daughter and the amount of gratitude. And then the other bit that we talked a little bit about, and then I want to get to my last bit, is the grief. Name the feelings for what they are. If you see somebody that's running around and they're angry and pissed off and all that stuff, chances are that's just a lid to some of the sadness. If I give myself permission to feel the grief, and the grief for watching some of the things you're going through and the stuff that I'm experiencing, I don't need to act out on that anger. And I don't need to add to the chaos. So I can acknowledge that this is a bad deal. And I feel sad about how it's affected myself and others. And I get to feel that. And sometimes I can't actually address it to what it is. I can't put it in a spreadsheet for you. I can't put it on a strategic timeline. There's no Gantt chart for how I'm feeling. It's just like, man, I just feel sad. It was like when the floods hit, after 14 days on the ground digging people out, we became sort of like that refugee center here. And sitting in a McDonald's, and I just broke down crying. I just the feeling of watching all the people around us, whether you know them or not. The human spirit never ceases to amaze me. And so I love to talk about kindness. I love to talk about, just the kindness piece, the gratitude. It's a magnet for more of that stuff. And life is short. use your choice wisely. Wake up in the morning and think, yeah, whatever stuff. I love Connie. You were talking about, man. I'm also a person in long-term recovery. I've got 32 years in recovery. I'm in my 33rd year. That's in a row. And, you know, at 17 years clean, I lost everything. Everything. But at the end of the day, I was like, well, what are you going to do? I have myself, right? I have the people that love me. I had a near-death experience in my life. I'm going through the kitchen. I'm carrying my daughter. And I was alone, and I grabbed a handful of trail mix and I threw it in my mouth, and it coated the back of my throat. And I just had first aid a week earlier. So I knew what was happening. I'm choking. I set her down on the ground. She's a toddler. And the lights started to go out from the sides, and it went completely black. And on the way down, I thought, not like this, not right now. I'm not ready yet. And out of that whole process, I was surrounded by people. I didn't have a house. I didn't have the money. I didn't have those things, but it was the people. So those are the things that matter the most to me. And I don't always do it perfect, but I'm ready to show up and be the best that I can for you today, not so that I look good, but for you today. And in that, we all receive. Do I have another minute to read one small thing?
Absolutely. One small thing, you bet.
This is it. I love this. It's from Nikita Gill. It says, I've always liked my people a bit damaged, a bit rough around the edges, a bit difficult to stereotype, a bit stranger than the normal crowd. I like people whose eyes tell stories and whose smiles have fought through wars. If you're perfect, chances are we aren't going to get on. If you're one of the cool kids, chances are you won't like me. You see, what I want is authentic. What I want to see is your purity. I want to see the way you wear your scars. I want to see how brave you are with your vulnerability, how emotionally naked you let the world see. Your damage may not be beautiful, but it has made you exquisite. It makes you original, different, and one of my kind of people, because people like you are the most incredible things about this world. Thanks a lot, guys.
Wow. Stacey, thank you for being so authentic and real and just sharing your heart and bringing us back to those things that are so important. We are so thrilled that you've been here today, and we love the work that you do with Fresh Start. We're champions of you, and we're holding you up as you navigate, and you've changed a lot of people's lives. There's a lot of people in the chat who have mentioned, you know, Stacey saved my brothers. Like, there's people. And so thank you. That was just a really great way to.
Thank you.
Oh,
thank you.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure. People are important. People are beautiful. Yeah. Well, everyone, we are almost at the very end. We have one more speaker. I am absolutely honored to introduce Abe Brown, who not only is my boss, so I better behave myself, but he is also a friend, him and Eunice. He is the CEO of Wellness Innovate that's hosting this today. He's also the president of the Certified Coaches Federation. And I'll tell you, he's the coach's coach. He had executive coaching for years and has worked both in not-for-profit and profit. And he has pivoted many times personally in his life. I know I have benefited greatly many times over from his coaching and his advice on hard things. And so we welcome you, Abe, to close us off.
Hey, thank you so much, Connie. And you know, what an incredible day so far. I'm going to make sure I flow and do my best to keep up with all of our great panelists today. So thank you so much, every panelist. We're so grateful that you've been here. And thanks, Connie. You know, you and I working together to pull this off. It's been great. I just want to kind of talk a little bit about the fact that, you know, a lot of experts are saying that the real second wave, as the lockdown eases, is going to be a mental health pandemic. And, you know, I think this is really important because, you know, like we heard actually from Minister Luan and from Mayor Nenshi, you know, COVID has had a physical impact. We get that. It obviously has an economic impact. But third, it has a mental health impact. I mean, you know, last week on our weekly webinar, we had, you know, a suicide expert from the world's leading suicide prevention company. And they were saying that calls to some suicide hotlines are reporting increases of 80 times. If you can imagine, in this pandemic, right? 80 times higher. And why, you might say? Well, the US alone has lost 40 million jobs. And at the same time as that has happened in Canada, 4 million Canadians have lost their jobs. And of course, about 7 million people have applied for the CERB, which is the emergency response benefit. Hundreds of thousands of businesses have closed their doors, and they probably will never open again, a good chunk of them. And that is a real tragedy. So what we're talking about is economic dislocation of massive proportions, but then the downstream mental health impact. And I mean, I've been knee deep in mental health for over 2 decades and worked in the nonprofit sector. And I can tell you the worst of this is yet to come. Meanwhile, as that has gone on, I don't know if you saw this, but Forbes magazine reported just the other day that as all of these folks have lost their jobs and all of these businesses have shut their doors, the 25 wealthiest people in the world have their net worth has gone up $255 billion just in the last 2 months. And so when you look at that, you think, well, how do we get through this? And so, Connie and I have really wanted to talk about pivoting. And part of the pivot is not just in your business strategy. There's business coaches who will help you with that. But how are you as an organization, whether you're for-profit or not-profit, how are you pivoting to the greatest shift that needs to happen right now in the workplace? And in our view, the greatest shift that needs to happen is in the area of workplace resilience and mental health, right? If we want to rebuild our economy, if we want to get back where we ultimately want to be, the only way that's going to happen is if people feel safe, not just physically, but there's also a psychological element to this thing called safety. And one of the crazy things about this is that, before COVID, about 86% of Canadians, 86%, that's a pretty high number, said that the organization is responsible for their mental health. Now think about that for a moment. I mean, if you're running an organization, that means that 86% of your people believe that you are partially responsible for helping to maintain their mental health. And how many of you think that because of COVID, that number's probably gone up rather than down, right? In other words, stress, anxiety, fear, I mean, it's rampant right now. It's all you are reading about. And so we think that the pivoting needs to happen. Sure. I mean, maybe before you were offline, now maybe you're online. Maybe before you did business this way, now maybe you're going to do it that way. And our great nonprofit executives have talked to us about how they've had to pivot fundraising and service delivery strategies. All of that is good. But what about pivoting around including workplace resiliency and mental health on the job? And I love what Mayor Nenshi said, and I actually wrote it down. It was so powerful. He said that workplaces need a strategy for mental health. Every business, every workplace needs that kind of strategy. And why is that? Well, because when people are healthy, when they're taken care of, when they're respected, when they're included, when they have psychological safety, of course, what does that lead to in terms of business? Well, it leads to incredible business outcomes. And so, a huge part of our passion in this conference in Pivot is not just to say, hey, let's get together and talk about business pivots, but what about pivoting towards creating workplaces that really support people? And I've said this many times before, one of the worst terms out there is this term social distancing. Because in the middle of, what might be the greatest pandemic we would see in our lifetime, physical distancing, maybe, but social distancing, not so much. Why? Because we need each other. We need the connections and the relationships and the support. Not only does our mental health depend on it, but actually our physical health does as well, along with our professional health. And so when we talk about business resilience, we're not just talking about strategy, but we're talking about making a shift towards supporting organizations. And so kind of on that note, I'm just going to turn it over to Connie and let her just tell you just for a moment about a little resource that you might find is helpful to you. And I'll just turn it over to Connie. So just go ahead, Connie, and let us know your thoughts on something here.
Well, what we started to notice just through COVID. As I said, we've been really watching and listening and leaning in to see what are people saying, what are businesses needing right now. I mean, our businesses had to shift tremendously. And one of the things that we did was we walked for 8 weeks with the Okotoks entrepreneurial ecosystem and met with them twice a week and went into some really hard discussions about resilience, about mental health, about tough conversations, boundaries, trauma, self-care. And we took those things and we started just really in a little bit of a beta program, figuring out what does it look like for people to rise above and rise strong right now. And we've come up with this 8-module online masterclass for workplace resiliency, not because the world needs another program, but because the world needs help and resources, and they need it right now. And if you ever have heard me, you'll know that my great passion is that people are not tools and strategies to be applied. They are human beings. We need to put the human back in human resources. And I really hope, my deepest prayer through all of COVID is that we remember how to come back to what it looks like to be community, to be human together, that connection. And this course is a big part of steps towards that. It's for your team, it's for your organization. It's not a huge price because right now people just need this help. And once you purchase it, it is yours. And we are always here as a resource. But again, it wasn't created just to fill our need to have another course or another thing to do. It was to meet a practical need right now. We're on the ground. We got our hands open. We're ready to serve.
So can you guys send that out to me in an invoice?
We will do that today.
Yes, we will. And folks, if you are interested in grabbing a copy of that, just reach out to Connie. We'll throw her email up on the screen and we'll send out the info as well. But, you know, as we do bring this, you know, to a close, you know, as you know, we haven't charged for this. We've had, I think, one of the highest level panelists that you would see anywhere. And what we are urgently hoping is that in lieu of a registration fee that you would, as in you, would consider making a donation to either Fresh Start Recovery Center or Hull Services or both. And, you know, you might say, well, where do I donate? What's so great about today is I checked out both of their websites. And if you go to both their websites, so Fresh Start, their website is freshstartrecovery.ca. And again, we're going to send out an email to all of you who registered for this with this information, so you don't have to panic. But if you go to freshstartrecovery.ca, they actually, maybe Stacey, tell us, you have a 100% donation matching program right now?
But wait, there's more. If you call now. Yeah, no, a bunch of our donors got together, super kind, and they were like, wow, you guys are kind of getting hammered into the ground with this. So what they opted to do is put together a pool of funds that would be a matching program. So when you contribute to Fresh Start, your donation is 100% matched, which is fantastic. We also, our biggest event of the year, our 12-stop ride for recovery. We're figuring out a different way to do it. We're going to do it virtually, but we bought a motorcycle to raffle off. Okay, you're not out selling raffle tickets in this, right? You go to hand somebody something and you're attacked. If you go online to our website, you can buy a raffle ticket, and it's a really nice motorcycle. So while I'm on here, and then I'll be like muted forever. Can I just do one thing here?
Yeah, sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Connie and Abe with Wellness Innovates.
You come on every webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got the right voice, but honestly, Fresh Start, such a great organization. Now, what if you don't have a motorcycle license, Stacey? What do? Does it come with a motorcycle license?
Well, you know what? We raffled a bike off a couple of years ago. The kid that won it sold it, and he's like north of 25 grand.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so that's great. So please go to freshstartrecovery.ca, and then you can also go to hullservices.ca. Julie, you know, I checked it out. You guys have a nice donate now button, so it's pretty easy to find. You know, Hull Family Services is so awesome. Tell us, Julie, any particular needs or anything special going on right now?
Yeah, you know, like Stacey, our in-person fundraising events, we're having to pivot those, and so we're working on that, and we kind of have, you know, option approaches based on what happens with re-entry and whether we'll be able to do some smaller events instead of, you know, that are linked together instead of one large event, or if they're going to be virtual. But we've got a car rally planned. We've got some things like that going on. There's the opportunity for people to designate where they'd like their funds to go, whether they're interested in particular kinds of populations or kinds of programs. You know, you could designate for community-based programs or for a therapeutic campus-based. There's always great need, and we're always happy to apply people's resources where they'd like to see them best used.
Yeah, and I can see on your website a matching program right now as well. So folks, please donate right away. And I'm not trying to make this too urgent, but to both of these organizations, these matching programs don't last forever. So what that means is your money, you know, is going to go further. And I can tell you, I know both of these folks personally. These are really well-run organizations. When I think about COVID, I think I want to support the most vulnerable. And in my view, who's more vulnerable than families and children right now? And of course, that's Hull Family Services. And who's more vulnerable than those who are in the middle of recovery? I mean, you know, in the middle of this health crisis. And I'll tell you, Stacey is one of the few people out there who believes in actual recovery, you know, and I don't want to push that too far, but Stacey, you guys have great track record, and same with Hull Services. And so folks, please support these generously. And I can tell you, Wellness Innovate will be making a donation to both as well, because we just believe in the work of these great organizations.
That's awesome. Thanks very much.
And on that note, please be looking, folks, all of you who have participated in the conference. Connie is going to be sending out an email with the recording from today, and also some of the links so that you can donate as well to these nonprofits, to these charities. And so I'll just turn it over to you, Connie. Any final thoughts? And we'll say goodbye to everybody today.
Well, we just want to thank you so much again for your time. And mostly, we just want to remind you again that you have what it takes to do hard things. Just remind yourself of that. Every word that is spoken, take one thing away from today and just apply it in there. Remember that you've got what it takes. And we will be here next Wednesday. We are here again, noon to 1. We don't go for 2 hours, noon to 1. It's free. It's a resource for you and your team as we continue on. But have a wonderful day, everyone.
Okay. You guys are awesome. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.